All right, good evening and welcome everyone. The Code Enforcement Committee meeting for Tuesday, July 18th will commence at 6:38. All right, if we could first have a silent meditation and pledge of allegiance. All right. Madam Clerk, can I please have roll call?
Roll call. Chair Erbom,
Present.
Vice Chair Perella,
Here.
Member Lightfoot Ward. Also present for the record, Janice Jacoby, Village Clerk, Christy Alou, Village Manager, and Code Enforcement Officer Fitz. You have a quorum.
Very good. All right. Next, I'm looking for approval of the agenda, which is essentially very good. Moved by Dr. Lightfoot Ward, second by Vice Perella. All in favor say aye. Any nays? Hearing none, the agenda is approved for the evening. This is the first good and welfare of the evening. If anyone would like to come up and give initial thoughts on the agenda items, you're more than welcome to, 3 minutes to a person. There will be another good and welfare at the end of the meeting, which will essentially be open business, whatever, anything at all you might have to discuss at the good and welfare at the end of the meeting would be that opportunity. When you do come up, just do please state your name and address for the record. All right, very good. Seeing none, we will move on to the first item of the night, which is the department statistics update. Fitz, if you would, come up and talk about. Oh, yeah, of course. No, he can be there. Absolutely. Yes.
So currently, my apology.
Oh, just for the benefit of everyone. Yes.
Introduction. Code Officer Fitzgerald Simmons. Currently, there are 270 open code cases. Just presented 24 before the special master on June 27th. And the next special master hearing is August 29th. Currently, there are 10 cases scheduled.
Okay. All right. So, and then as you came on into this position, about ballpark, how many open cases did you initially walk through the door?
It was approximately 430.
About 430 open cases at that time?
Yes, and that
Okay.
included notice of civil infraction, courtesy notice, and verbal warnings.
Okay. And at this point in time, any citation activity that you are initiating as opposed to following up from open cases that might have been there prior to your tenure here, right?
For
So-
me, yeah.
So at this point in time, any new citations that you're initiating, you have full ability to document everything in terms of not
From
just the
initial
forms,
to-
but video and photo evidence as well. Is that correct?
Yes, about 80 cases.
Okay, so the reason I make that point is because I know that a lot of those open cases that you walked into did not have a lot of the necessary documentation for some of, well, for all residents. But some of the newer residents might not realize that for about 10 years in this village, we really did not have code enforcement or active code enforcement. So in addition to that, our code is, as you know, you can see from the agenda tonight, our code is outdated and we are aware of that. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to let the residents know who you are, that you're out there every day, things are happening, actions being taken. Is there anything else you would like to speak to in terms of the day-to-day activity that you do?
Yes, code enforcement. I am the code enforcement department, so my job does entails me doing the officer field work as well as the administrative field work. I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with code enforcement, but aside from actually doing proactive code enforcement, which means patrolling and observing a violation, but as well as being reactive, responding to complaints. Considering, as you know, Councilman Erbaum stated, a lot of our code is very outdated. A lot of it is from 1965. So it does need to get with the times, but so therefore I have to put in a lot of additional work with the investigation process. So it takes a little longer than necessary. From the observation to doing the research of the property to see when certain things were built, when certain permits expired, to actually documenting it, photographing it, coming in, writing a notice, mailing a notice, making sure I satisfy your due process with the mailing and the posting, to following up on every single case, to scheduling for special master, to presenting for special master. So it's overwhelming at times, but I'm getting it done.
Thank you very much. So, for the benefit of the residents, to understand our acknowledgement that the code is outdated. So, in recent years, we've had an urban planner assisting us with priorities that have arisen within the code, right? So I think the fence was the big one that kind of kicked things off in terms of town halls and statistical data, resident input, year-long process just to the fence ordinance was the big first step to all that, right? So through that process, we've essentially established that he's reading the sign on the door that's essentially for daytime hours. So, all right, if anyone would just let him know he can come in those doors. All right, so what we've learned through that process with the urban planners is that there is a lot of work to do within the code. So we're actually, the full council is taking steps currently to bring in essentially a secondary urban planning company to really focus on the code itself, while our historical urban planners of choice focus on the larger projects, which is what we brought them on to do, right? So it is a long process. It can be tedious. I will say I am very glad to see so many faces here tonight. It's always a good sign that we get resident input. We could not do this without it. So would anybody in the audience have anything to add or comment on in terms of the day-to-day kind of statistical data, the kind of not, there's not too much that's super exciting in code enforcement, but with some of these more day-to-day details, if there is anybody who would like to speak to it, please do. You can come up, yes. Just state your name and address for the record.
Undergoing a process, I am quite surprised and satisfied with the job that the city is doing.
That's awesome. That is all Officer Simmons. So truly it is all Officer Simmons. So all credit to Officer Simmons. All right. So in that regard, before we move on to the next item, the last thing I will say in the day-to-day is that the goal of code enforcement has never been fundraising. That is certainly not one of the roles of the department at all. It is simply compliance. So a lot of these issues that we might find contentious will come down to essentially the code, right? It all is going to come down to the code. So what we're hoping to accomplish with at least a few items here tonight is to kind of get some framework of recommendations that we might be able to take to the full council and kind of raise some of these issues with different codes to the forefront and take the opportunity to do that. So and then lastly, before I move to the next item, is that I do intend to have another code enforcement committee meeting in September. And I would like to have yet another one in November as well. Kind of traditionally, we've had committee meetings every other month, and at least with code enforcement, now that we've kind of, the wheels are no longer spinning, we've got traction, and we're headed into the future rapidly. Feels good. So I think we've got enough to discuss to kind of get code enforcement back on a regular meeting schedule. So there you go. All right, item F2, swell recommendations to the mayor, vice mayor, and village council. So who would like to speak to the swale issue? I will if I can take it, or
Thank you, Councilperson Erbaum and members of the Code Enforcement Committee. You know, as Mr. Simmons has done his work and assessed the department, the needs of the village, he identified a number of things that need to be updated or improved upon or just discussed at this level with the council. We thought it important to bring that to this committee, some of those items related to materials in the swale, how we handle some storage issues. I mean, Mr. Simmons, I think it's best if it comes from him, because he's not only done that research but also found alternatives, and he presented it to the entire council through me via email and several memos. We thought it important to bring those matters to this, some matters related to code to this committee, so that we can at least start the discussion and get some feedback from residents as well. So I'm going to let Mr. Simmons kind of introduce some of those items that were shared with you.
very good.
A big thing in particular is the swell area. Miami-Dade County requires the swell area to have sod. I noticed throughout the village that a lot of properties have gravel, decorative rocks, paved, and in reference to the paving, you know, aside from Miami-Dade County requiring sod, in order to pave pave the swell area, you also need a permit and council's approval. So we're at an impasse where, in reference to the paving of the swell areas, compliance is tearing it up and having it resodded. I understand that one major pushback in reference to the swell area has been the location of a lot of properties. They deal with drainage issues. So as long as they've been here, some been here longer than others, but in the meantime, prior to me coming, they have sodded it before it dies, because when it rains, it floods and it kills the grass. Now they get it's much better with gravel being there.
Right.
But, you know, unfortunately, you know, as I have to express, you know, the code isn't written with exceptions to certain areas and where they're located and have these drainage issues. And it's unfair to enforce it on one block that doesn't flood, but not the next block that does flood. So that's one major concern that comes up in reference to the swell areas.
So with the swales, in terms of, let's take paved areas, right?
Yeah.
So when you say the remedy is to tear it up and put in sod, right? There's no way that we can consider that a reasonable remedy to have everybody tear up the swales and re-sod, correct?
No.
Right. In addition to that, we have septic to sewer. You know, within the next, you know, decade, we're hoping to have the entire village hooked up to sewer, right? So at that time, any resident wanting to hook up to sewer is going to have to dig up a portion of the front yard to connect to sewer. So if we stuck with the current remedy and required, can't believe I'm saying this, required all the residents to tear up their swales and plant sod, then we know that within a few years, we'd be asking them to tear up part of their front again, right? Redo work to connect to sewer. So, so what do we think the purpose of, I mean, let's look at that, right? So what is the overall purpose trying to accomplish? We're specifically talking about flood mitigation, right? So we're specifically talking about needing swales to have permeable surface. So assuming that we would change the code to kind of bring it into modernity, right? And have language that made more sense, then in that instance, no one would really have to do anything until they made changes to the front yard, driveway, whatnot. Is that correct? Like, everyone would essentially be grandfathered in at that point with their current condition. And we'd be moving forward with anybody looking to make changes to their swale would have to bring the swale up to code at that point. Is that correct?
The current issue we face to make that accommodation is it being a county code. So we can only align or set a more strict precedence.
Okay, but we could make more strict precedents, right? In terms of a requirement of permeability. Does the county code currently require, is permeability the word they use?
No, it says sod.
It says sod,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, okay, so you can't plant in grass by seed then? It has to be sod, you know what I mean? So,
Has to be sod.
okay, so, in that regard then, I mean, I think that we have enough information from our own resiliency and sustainability task force right here in the village of, like, our task force, right? We have more than enough information from them to understand what we do want swales of the future essentially to look like and be like, right? So we would be looking to write a code along those lines, understanding that most everybody in the village is not going to be in compliance because of current conditions, right? But understanding that anybody coming in to do work or otherwise, redo a driveway specifically, but new construction, remodeling, et cetera, anything that would affect that swale now, the new code would be applying to that, and it would take, I think, a couple of decades to get the entire village fully into compliance with that code. That is my personal thoughts on how that would look and be headed into the future. But are we in agreement that the current swale code is technically unenforceable in this village?
No.
Okay, but I mean, like, we can't go knock on someone's door and ask them to tear up their swale and plant sod, though.
Well, in reference to the construction in the right-of-way, if it was done prior to 2003 with the permit and approval, those are the only individuals exempt. So
No
if it was,
kidding.
yeah, if it was
Okay.
done before 2003.
Okay,
So that along the lines of the observance, looking at the history of the property, if a permit was obtained to
Okay.
extend the approach,
then you're good.
they're fine.
Otherwise, yeah.
Otherwise,
Okay.
yes.
All right, very good. I'm certainly curious to catch thoughts from anyone else on the committee on this specific item.
Yes. Officer Simmons. This issue is basically flooding, right? This is what we're talking about, is flooding.
No, the properties that are having an issue with the sodding, where their property is located, it flood the most. So they have to change it more frequent than others.
So we all are homeowners here. What I found out, and I'm just gonna do it for the public record, that not only do I live on a corner, and most drivers don't have any respect for your yard when you live on a corner. So I also have a water meter, 2 water meter, whatever you call those, 2 things in the hole and taking up whatever. And they were starting to run on top of those. That's not in the swell, that's in my yard. So what I did is I got some P-rock, because they come around the corner, and one time I had boulders. I had boulders that I put out on the front end of the corner code enforcement person at that time told me I had to remove it because it might damage somebody's car. I hope it does, because you had no business running in my yard. But I complied because I do sit on the council, and I was mayor at the time, and I don't act like y'all know, thank you, I appreciate that. So the boulders left, and then one of the code enforcement officers told me that I could use the pyramid. The pyramid, you all know what I'm talking about, I see you got it, the pyramid things. So I started using them for a while, and I'm going back to that come before the end of this summer, because now they're getting crazy again. My point is, I use P-Rock on the front, because they were driving into and onto my yard. Now, you don't need a rocket scientist to know that those are city trees in my yard. You don't need rocket scientists, and I've been there for 30 years. So what I've done, and I'm putting it on record so that people that are listening can hear, if you put down P-Rock, now you gotta have a lawn person tell you how much, otherwise you could really put out a lot more than you actually need. All you're trying to do is find a place for the water, for the rocks to hold the soil. That's what my horticulturalist told me. You're just trying to find a way to maintain the soil. So mine has P-Rock right in between the big trees that El Patel planted, and I love them because they were little bitty twigs when they went in. They're huge now, and the shade is wonderful. I found that to be much more advantageous. My problem is the corner, going around that corner. So I'm going back to my pyramids and put them in because they're low, and they told me they're okay. Unless you tell me differently, code enforcement, I'm going back to my pyramids, okay? To make sure that they don't run up on the water. I have 2 large water, what's those things called? It says water sewer. They're big tanks on and they're in the right of way. Storm drains, that's all I'm talking about. The storm draining is one thing, but the thing that holds, they have to, the county has to come along every now and then and pump that. I'm talking about those. Talking about those. I have 2 of them in my yard. Why? We're not talking about that. 2 of them. Next to each other, talking about, hi honey, they're that close. And that's my recommendation, because what I found when I put down the P-Rock, the grass would grow. And when the grass grows, that made all the difference in the world of how people drove in my yard. No, I do not plan to fence off it's too pretty. It's just too, everybody know where I live. It's just too pretty. I don't intend to fence it off. So thank you so much for letting it be a discussion item, because I've had calls, and it's flooding out front. Then I realized there's 2 things going on, Mr. Code Enforcement Officer. They're driving in the yard. Nobody wants to take credit for that. You're driving in your yard where there is no concrete. I see some people out there shaking their head. You're gonna definitely affect the rest of the neighborhood. So first of all, you should be driving on your paved entry. You should be driving on your paved entry.
Approach.
That's right. You should be driving on that. We're about to have our driveway extended, okay, because we got more cars now. But that was my remedy. When I realized what they were telling me at the Home Depot, get you some P-Rock, put it out 3 feet deep, and you won't have that problem. The grass is now covering the P-Rock, but the P-Rock is still there. But it's stable ground, unlike, that's my point. It's stable ground as opposed to what it was previously. There are remedies that homeowners can do. Got a hand out there.
1 moment for the public, just,
I mean, I have
okay.
basically no comments, because, again, what Mr. Siemens had said about complying with Miami-Dade Code is different than what we had over here, because we had this conversation a few years ago, and we went through the whole process, and we actually agreed to grandfather in whoever had gravel on the easements and whatever, thinking that it was something And now we find out that we actually going against Dade County code. So, and we saw a problem. I wasn't never, in favor of that. And that was one of the issues was raised, like, who do you know it was grandfathered in if you don't have pictures of all properties? And I can tell you, and I can name you right now, after that went on, how many houses went and put gravel in. Because I know everybody's, I know every single property in the village, pretty much. So,
It's changing.
Yeah, so I'm about to open the meeting up to the public. I'll just say that I have neighbors who've been here since 1979, and they have P-rock as well. Like, it's like river rock, but pea-sized, right? So I will say that that is a different animal than specifically gravel. Gravel is what ends up in the street because there is innumerable ways for that gravel to
That's
hitch a ride on something, right? Whereas the P-rock, the river P-rock, is not really lifted at all, as the councilwoman is saying, when it's done correctly. So I feel that what we're trying to accomplish here is get to a place where we can accomplish some flood mitigation, some beautification. I know that our urban planners, so here's the thing, bioswales is what we're also talking about. So if we could accomplish no more asphalt in the swales in this village, what you would have would be almost 20 feet of green space additional in every street, at least all the streets that can accommodate two-way traffic. And then other streets would naturally become one-ways. 88th comes to mind, for example. So there is a concept that we already have working on in our overall Resilient Streets project, which includes speed mitigation, includes pedestrian walkways. All of these things are trying to be in concert and coercion with the overall plan. So something like a bioswale is on our mind in terms of how do we truly get all the asphalt up from all of the swales in this village and create immense amounts of green space, including space for walking paths and things like this. So having said that, I will close the meeting to the committee and open it to the public. Sir, please just state your name and address for the record.
This one. This one's working. If you want, Calixto, can you change to this one? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you all, Dr. Lightfoot Ward, Ombers, and Virela, and everybody from the village staff. Regarding the swale, I think, we're kind of all on board that even though Miami-Dade County has the ordinance that you have to have sod, Simmons, I think that we have to be realistic. As our oak trees grow, there is no way I could put sod. The roots are coming up above the sidewalk, above the street, and it's roots. No sod would live there. And then it floods because where it is, a big hole, so I have to put P-rocks. And I think a lot of us in the village have to make do as long as there is a filtration.
That's right.
Way that the water filters through is a good idea, and I liked your idea about using environmental friendly, because obviously with concrete it won't work, but we have to be a bit more dynamic, because if we all learned one thing in grade school, the only way grass grows is with sunlight. And if those oak trees keep on growing, there is not going to be any sunlight hitting that sod, and it's going to die. And you're going to be sighting every single house in the village. So we have to coordinate. I mean, already in here back in here in
Sherwood Forest.
in Sherwood Forest, it's very hard to grow any grass there because it's a forest. So we have to look at that, we have to modify that, and one option, code enforcement, this is for our code enforcement, is we don't have to enforce. You look the other way, okay? Because you look the other way. Do we enforce every single law that are in the books in the state of Florida? You know, there are sodomy laws. Obviously, they're not enforced.
Point made.
Okay, so case in point, I think that we should revisit this. I think we're on the same track here, and I understand, everybody understands, but you can't grow grass where grass can't grow.
Yeah, please come up, yep. So while she's coming up, I will say to that, that I think one of our fears right now is, coupled with a goal, is to mitigate as many, we don't want to see a lot of changes happening currently to swales because we're trying to make this happen. So in terms of new construction and things like that, like I said, like the concerning thing is that people with good intentions are going to put something in that creates its own other nuisance in terms of road degradation or not mitigating the flood like was intended anyway.
Exactly, if I may, and if exactly that. So once somebody passed by Sherwood Forest, and let's say they have an exception to do that because of the conditions of the area, then somebody else on 89 or 90th, which is a perfectly sunny street, gonna say, oh, they have P-rocks or they have gravel in their easement, so I want to do the same. So that's the only issue and the only problem with, this kind of like,
Yeah, truly.
look the other way.
So hello, my name is Margaret Penning. I live at 276 Northeast 90th Street. I purchased the home, it's been 7 years now, and when I did purchase the home, the swale had rocks, smaller rocks. And it's been that way. As the other gentleman said, my ficus trees, or oak trees, I'm sorry, do have the roots that are growing over the swale, and throughout the years, the rock has been replaced. So my swale actually is on a kind of a hump. But the rocks don't go onto the street, they don't go onto the sidewalks, they stay put. And, I just don't know. I tried, my front yard grass was dying from the day I moved in. I resodded it 3 times. I called the people that come and fertilize. They did it for about 3 months. Nothing was happening, and he said it's because of the leaves, the wet leaves from the trees that fall will kill the grass. And he said you're just like going to be constantly resodding. But so what I did was I laid mulch and lots of plants like my neighbors across the street had done. Unfortunately, I was told that's not legal either, but it's there, so I don't know what else to do.
Well,
I mean, we can have a bunch of weeds in the front yard. Some things we can't fight Mother Nature sometimes.
right. Well, ironically, I think what we're actually trying to get to with the swale specifically is almost the swale exactly as you're describing, where you have natural vegetation. I mean, the more natural vegetation you have, the more mitigation power you have against flooding, because you have more plants that are going to soak up more water in a large rain event, right?
Well, the mulch was in the front yard, not the swale. The swale is rocks.
Right. So, but something like that, like a mulch path with natural vegetation, is almost, kind of the vision of the future of what, a walking path and swales should be in a village kind of like this, So, so I don't know if that makes you feel better or not, but I mean, we're trying to get to a point where we have an ordinance that we can apply uniformly. There might be exceptions, for example, a forested area versus, a different climate entirely just a few blocks away, which is fascinating. So,
well, and I'd like one other point about the Miami-Dade Code, that swales have to have grass. I mean, if you go around Keystone,
but the word
other
they
Miami
use is sod.
Shores, I mean,
Yeah, see, I mean, that's, you gotta
solid
challenge that as
sod.
a racketeering thing, like.
yeah,
gotta use
I
a
mean,
sod
down
company?
south in Kendall, I mean, all the swales are not, most of them, especially those with big trees, do not have grass.
Right, and they wouldn't, right, sure.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
very welcome, yes,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
speaking of the leaves, my landscaper told me to stop doing so much raking. I stopped raking, and guess what started growing? Grass. I was like, I've been here all my life. What do you mean I didn't know that happens? I did know that happened, I just forgot. So now I have grass. I like what she brought. I like the point she brought. I have grass in my yard that I did not have. And I put down grass when I moved in. I put down grass, and then someone else came along and put down more grass. And he says, well, the thing is, you have what you need, but you keep breaking. And when you keep breaking, you don't give the nature time to do what it does. And then I remember going to the Everglades, and I didn't know how the grass grew in the Everglades. I do know now. I mean, in the soft areas, I do know now. They don't rake out there. So I have grass in my front yard where I didn't have grass before because I stopped raking so much. And point specific, you go behind Horseman Middle School, you're gonna see 3 big trees. You're gonna see 3 big areas and 2 big trees. You're gonna see that all of them are piled with leaves because I didn't know how to stop raking leaves. But you should see what's happening to those plants that I planted in there. They're holding that tree, holding the yard, and holding the grass. And I didn't even know that was gonna happen. So take a look. I'm at 415 Northwest 88th Terrace, right there behind the school, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I had no idea. I forgot about the ideas that leaves are fertilizers. I forgot about that. Basic.
No, this is true. So, I read a book once called Secret Life of Plants, and then it described that weeds essentially are performing alchemy and changing whatever the soil is missing. That's what weeds show up and provide what the soil is missing. So, anyway, all right. Would anyone else from the public like to comment on swale issues? The glamorous, exciting topic of swale issues.
You know what?
Hi, how are you? My name is Diego Sabino. We live in 390 Northeast 88th Street. Basically, we're here because obviously we got a violation. We work on it. We live in a corner as well, so we have the problem of the traffic and everything, but our corner gets flooded completely, and goes into the sidewalk as well. So we sorted the corner, but in front of the house where the worst area is, we put P-rock, like everybody on the street. The question is, what is the city or what is the plan? I know that the material that's gonna change, obviously salt, we have lived there for 7 years. We have replanted it multiple times. Yesterday we sent an email. We met with Officer Siemens because we have actively, spent a lot of money trying to fix it, but it's a problem that is not going away. So the question is, I understand that we're talking about materials, but what is the proposal from the city to fix the area? Because it not only affects our house, it affects the entire 88th Street, and the majority of the houses already have rocks.
So there's two different pieces to that answer. So one is to come up with a plan for what to do with the swale specifically, because it's an opportunity to create flood mitigation in terms of having something that can both drain as well as absorb, right? And so in addition to that, so septic to sewer is a big topic of discussion because people are wondering, when would I be able to hook up to sewer, right, and get off of septic? Well, another parallel action being taken is stormwater mitigation. So there is a multi-phase plan that has already experienced completion of phase 1, if I'm not mistaken. And so we are also moving towards basically updating the infrastructure of the actual storm water drainage system. So the ability for the village overall to in a more rapid fashion, be able to get water essentially into the canal. And then that obviously brings in a whole entirely other discussion that is its own universe, and a fascinating one at that, which is seawalls associated with the canal right there. So this is all in the works.
In the works.
Actively in motion to get us to a point where we are able to be resilient as just as you say, these things are not going, it's not changing, right? We're going to get another flood event. We're going to get another storm. We're going to, you know, so there are multiple plans from multiple angles going at this. And the swale is a big piece of that discussion. So, yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
not just a beautification issue. It's not just, you know, it's right. It's a safety issue as well. So, you know, it really is kind of a big deal. So, all right, very good. Anyone else from the public would like to talk about the exciting topic of swales? Very good. I will close the meeting to the public and bring it back to the committee. All right. Okay. So, Mr. Simmons, you are at the mercy of the code to some degree, correct? And so we all agree that our code is technically inadequate. Is that correct?
Very
Yes.
much.
Okay. All right. Very good. So my personal recommendation to this committee is that we have Juan and Camila, who already have this plan ready for presentation, come to the committee meeting, the Code Enforcement Committee meeting in September, and present. They have a comprehensive plan, but I'm just going to have them present specifically the plan for the swales, okay? And then after we see that plan as a committee, I think we would be in a position to at least make a couple of general recommendations to assist Mr. Simmons in his ability to do the job or eliminate some responsibility to it, however that looks like, at least so that he would be free to work on more pressing matters while at the same time advance us towards being able to do something with this resilient strategy that we have in light of the challenges we face. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So, because as we talk about the swales, I do believe we know two people who already have a plan in place specifically for this. And after hearing this discussion, understanding that really what we're trying to accomplish is public safety, flood mitigation, first and foremost, and then all the beautification aspects can be secondary to those two items. Is that right? Okay. Okay. All right. So, so before I move on to F3, I will say what, at this point in time, what's going to happen with the swales is, because August, for the benefit of the public, August is government holiday, essentially. We will not have any committee meetings in August, right? And so it's also approaching the end of the fiscal year. We'll be doing budget in September, preparing for the new fiscal year, correct? So September will be very busy with budget. However, I do intend to have this committee meeting convene in September. And on this issue of swales, I will have people with some expertise in the matter come in and make a presentation of what the future swales might look like. And at that point, hopefully we'll have some recommendations to bring to the council in October, hopefully allowing for Mr. Simmons again to be able to be more effective at his job. Any comments, questions, concerns, compliments, complaints?
Yes, to keep it consistent and fair until those changes are presented and approved. I will continue to apply it as stated within the code.
Absolutely.
Because considering some properties that I have had to go to for more pressing matters,
Right.
and I address that along with that,
Right.
they have comply, and there are other properties with the same issue that I must address.
Correct. Yes. No, I see the rock and the hard place that you are stuck between for sure. So I certainly recognize that, and I greatly appreciate your ability to handle that with grace. So, so more power to you, sincerely. All right. Okay. very good. Moving on to F3. So general recommendations to the mayor, vice mayor, and village council, noise, trash, parking, and light. So some of you are here specifically because of specific noise issues. Some of you are here tonight specifically because of another issue. So I am willing to give everybody time. So this is regarding, well, let's start with outdoor lighting if we could. Let's just start there. All right. I will defer to the expert, but if you'd like me to introduce the subject, I'm happy to do that as well. I'll introduce it. You got it. Okay. All right. So outdoor lighting. So this has been a fairly consistent topic of discussion for some time. I've been in the neighborhood 10 years. I personally align with the philosophy of dark cities for the benefit of night, a lot of things. I remember when Wilma hit, you could see the Milky Way in Miami-Dade County for 2 nights when Wilma came through. It took them 2 nights to get the airport and downtown with lights again. And by the time they had the airport lit, it was all over. You couldn't see the Milky Way any longer. So I'll never forget that. Wilma was a bit of an unforgettable experience all around. So in that regard, we are a Tree City, USA, right? So we have a lot of overgrowth. So in terms of lighting and things, we have a lot of issues with, well, I need to combat the vegetation, right, that's attacking my lights in terms of shade and whatnot, shadows and things to that effect, right? So just initially here in section 33, 4.1, lights are for area lighting of outdoor areas such as, but not limited to, tennis courts, golf courses, sporting areas or grounds, parking lots or areas, amusement or entertainment areas, and outside lighting for security purposes shall not be permitted except under the following conditions. So it's essentially outlined that more of a commercial application of lighting is not permitted without the following exemptions. And at that point, I think, Mr. Simmons, what would you like to tell us about this specific topic and issues that you've faced, and any recommendations you might have?
The biggest issue with this is primarily in reference to a lot of the exterior flood security lights. The direction, that is, like, in reference to the code, all outdoor lighting requires a permit. And the purpose of the permit is to address the half-a-foot candle of light spillage to the point that it doesn't adversely impact the adjacent property.
How would a resident go about understanding whether or not that fairly scientific measurement of light, would they be confident in knowing whether or not they were in or out of compliance with?
It will primarily me in reference to the outdoor lighting complaints. The way I investigate it is that, once again, I have to go do the research on the property. I pull up the original plans of the property. If that light wasn't there as a part of the original development, then that means it was installed without a permit. At that point is when I issue a citation, because all of the concerns that the adjacent property faces because of the light is addressed with the permit, as far as height, location, wattage, direction, coverage.
Okay.
So that is in the code.
Yes. And that the permit is required for the installation of outdoor lighting because of the height, because of the spillage. So the height, the location, the wattage, all of that is included within the permit, rather not so it doesn't adversely impact the adjacent property.
Okay, very good. All right. Here in the committee, anyone have any comments specifically on outdoor lighting before I turn it over to the public?
Mr. Chairman, you didn't say anything about the noise, the trash.
We're gonna
You
get
said
there,
the-
but we're gonna
you
take.
just said
we're-
light.
Right, we're gonna take them one at a time here, and we're gonna start with light to see what we shake out in terms of any recommendations, issues, or other, and then we'll move on to the others, and then truthfully, if someone has something else that's not listed specifically in an agenda here, I'm happy to hear comments on that as well. But for the moment, I just want to stick with light, kind of address that, and then we'll move on to the next kind of
The
topic.
noise, the trash, and the party.
Right,
I thought we were
exactly,
gonna be
yes.
here for a minute. We're gonna be here all night.
I can keep us moving pretty quickly, but it's a long time coming, and honestly, I feel it just very necessary to get through this tonight and get to a place in September where we can, you know, whatever, meat, potatoes, rubber to road, all that stuff, so, all right. Very good. Good? Okay, I'll close the meeting to the committee and open it to the public.
Hold on,
Oh, okay.
I thought you said you were gonna
Lighting.
ask us
I
first.
was, yeah, but I thought, okay.
Okay, we still doing lights, or we
Yes,
going on?
if you have any comments on light,
We still doing lights, y'all.
yes. Okay, that's your comment. Okay, all right. Very good. To the public then, anybody with comments on? You will need to come to the podium to ask that question. I know. Okay. So, I heard a rumor that someone was asking if you needed a permit to put up some lights. So, the way this code reads, and Mr. Simmons will correct me if I'm wrong, but the way the code reads that any outdoor lighting, all outdoor lighting, technically needs to be permitted. Is that correct?
And permanent matter.
Any
Permanent.
permanently installed, I got you. Okay, all right. So if you feel like you can make that argument, it's not permanent lighting. That's right, so, okay,
Wait a minute.
all right.
Question, I don't want any confusion later. If you already have lights and the bulb blew, that's not bringing you to get no permit, right? That's just the bulb that blew, right?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Changing the bulb, but issue that may arise because of that is the type of bulb.
Okay.
Or the direction.
You know where I'm going.
Right, yeah.
Because you often see folks changing their lights. It's the same process, they're just changing the light. That's already in your property that says you do have a porch light, you know, that type of thing. So let's don't get it twisted. It's when you want to change your lighting on your property. And in this case, it's been,
Or, I'm sorry, I might
Go ahead,
interrupt.
you can
Or
interrupt.
all of a sudden, you decided to change the regular light bulb for a spotlight that's hitting
that's right.
the front
That's right.
property.
You're not, you and the light's not doing what it used to do regularly. So let's don't get too out there in the water. Stay right where we are. If you got a light already, we're not talking
Oh,
about that. We're
I like
talking
the
about
deep end.
those other things. Because I know for a fact that I quietly had to ask neighbors to kind of lower that lens. I don't need it shining in my backyard. But they didn't realize that was what was happening, okay? Whether they got a permit or not, that was not what my concern. My concern was, don't put it where it's flying into my bedroom. I don't need that. So that wasn't the case at all. That wasn't it at all. They just hadn't finished what they were doing when they put the lights back up. That's all. That's all that was.
So firstly, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the topic of light? I'd like to keep it to the public for the moment if I can.
Hello, I'm Thomas Pulliam. I live at 205 Northeast 86th Street. I'm actually really satisfied with this ordinance as is. I do have one question and suggestion for it. Overall, it hasn't been enforced in the past 10 years, though, like you've said. So there have been a lot of people who've been here for a long time who have put up things, permitted or not, without following. There's so much that goes into lighting. I'm remodeling my house right now. It's complete. There's lighting designers, guys. Like, it's such a huge thing. So like having and walking around, especially I'm in Sherwood Forest at 205 Northeast 86th Street, and I walk here to these meetings. It should be a very aesthetic stroll this way here. Unfortunately, when I walk back, there's going to be several spotlights people have installed that are going to be glaring directly in my face. I haven't reported them, so since we don't have proactive enforcement right now, they probably haven't been cited. I would like to see one addition to this in terms of the color of the lighting. I've seen a lot of variety of coloring. from different kelvins, which really changes the aesthetic as well, especially when people are flooding them into the streets. Personally, since I did move to the village 2 years ago, both of my neighbors on each side had been there for about 20 years. So they did have, it was, in my case, where they were shining lights through my windows. My property's very much recessed in the back. And so, you know, that was something where really for a year I've been needing to ask for this to be enforced. So I'm very glad that it has been to this point. I think it could be enforced further, and I'd like to see a possible addition, or my suggestion for addition, having to deal with the color of the lighting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, is there anyone else who would like to speak on the topic of lighting specifically this evening? The ordinances is written. All right, I'm going to close the meeting to the public, bring it back to the committee. So I will say that as the topic of the village lighting, so the poles that might be, you know, behind properties and then out near the streets, that was a huge discussion as far as FPL was going to be giving us a bunch of new generation bulbs, and then it was discussion of color and everything else. And so for me, you know, as I said at the beginning, you know, I align with the concept of dark cities. However, that's only really half the story, because you do need lighting for security. You do need lighting just for people to be able to truly kind of, you know, see their surroundings as they're traveling through the neighborhood, right? And so I've always been amazed a little bit at the way police car lighting is, in terms of, I wonder how anybody can see anything on a crime scene, because there's so many flashing lights in your face, kills your night vision. You can't hardly see you know, shadows moving. And so in terms of the village lighting, me personally, I would love to see us get to where we have more kind of like walkways lit, for example, as opposed to the entire street, because sometimes with the very high lighting, it creates deep shadows in places, and sometimes I feel like it's almost easier for people to hide in these deep shadows when everyone else who's otherwise a law-abiding citizen is blinded by and has their night vision taken away by some aggressive lights, right? So this gets to be a heated topic, surprisingly, specifically because of security reasons. So there are people who just truly have a need to be able to see their space around them, for them to be able to, it's called the full enjoyment of your property, right? So to fully enjoy and be relaxed at your property. You know, being able to see your surroundings is a significant piece of that, specifically for the sighted, right? And so, so that's where this gets to be neighbor versus neighbor, I'm guessing, in terms of light through a bedroom window. Otherwise, like, so the direction and intensity of the light, right? And then it's, well, if I don't have the direction or the intensity, then I lose my security factor, right? So it sounds, I was hoping for a little more, I don't know, issues from the public tonight in terms of, hey, you know, let's change this. We've got it. And so I will say that color is already being kind of discussed, at least at the village level, in terms of what the village might be doing in the future. The birds are an issue in terms of, you know, proper environment for the birds to thrive, right? And then security. So that's all the balance with that.
And that's my only issue. And I think I asked you that question about, you know, now I've seen more people, you know, lighting up the trees, which is not ideal for our wildlife, the birds and all of that. So it should be a code for that if we don't have it. That's something that needs to be included, because now, and I know it looks beautiful and whatever, but it doesn't really, it does affect a lot our wildlife here.
Sounds
and
like
the
a
birds
great
and all of that.
recommendation to bring from the tree board. So, all right. Okay. All right. Seeing as we've satisfied the discussion of light, don't worry if these are the issues we're talking about tonight, you will see as recurring issues as committee meetings go on into the future. So I don't want anyone to feel like anything's a closed case in terms of things tonight. Noise, next. Very good. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You know I live behind Horace Mann Middle
Mhm.
School. Periodically, there are events at the school, understood, not even picking on the school. But the speeding traffic, everybody know what Third Avenue looks like. It looks like it's a one-way. We're gonna get there and we're gonna get there quick.
Track strip.
No stop signs or nothing. The noise is the loud music being played. It may not have to be our village. I've learned from stopping cars, because they stopped, they slowed down when they saw somebody waving, that they think this is in the county. I said, whether it was or not, it's dangerous. We don't have bumps. We don't have anything to slow down traffic. Everybody know Third Avenue, Northwest? It's like straight there. As soon as you get from the county side into the village side, straight shot, no stops, no nothing. Get to the corner where the painter lives. What's the painter name? Jasper Paints. And you almost see an accident. So the noise is one thing, cars going through like they're on the speedway. The other one is we don't have any bumps on our street to slow that down. So we're gonna take care of that. So those that wanted to come to talk about that, we're already looking at that. I'm already looking at that. The noise at night, in my area, we very seldom, as a matter of fact, we call the police immediately to let them know that they're disturbing the peace. And they stop. But we do it in a nice way. Just tell them, we just can't have that. The trash, if you're not putting out your garbage in time, don't expect the truck to come back. How many people know when the garbage is coming? Okay, I like the number. But keep a look at the calendar. Miami-Dade County gives us the calendar. Don't throw away when you see Miami-Dade. That's like the first of the year they give the calendar. So you know when Tuesdays and whatever, your trash needs to be out. Don't wait until Wednesday morning, because that truck's trying to go home to his family too. Not the truck, the driver. Trying to go home to his family too. It's 2 days, not 3. It's 2 days a week, not 3. The third one is on that 3 months out of the year, we get bulk pickup. That is not the time to have your family come and put their bulk pickup for pickup. That is not the time to do that. It costs us money as taxpayers. You saw our millage rate has gone up. That's one reason why. It is not a time for you to bring your family from somewhere else and put it there. So pass the word on, because we've seen that happen in my section, where I live at, my section. How in the world you can put out a half of a garage and you don't even have a garage that's known a utility shed? Where'd that come from? We had it at our house. I guess you did. End of the issue. I have a sense of humor too. As opposed to trash, that's what I'm talking about. As opposed to parking, I'll let the experts know, because I already know if you don't realize how short our streets are and you having a big deal going on, better have somewhere to put that car, put that vehicle, because these people are not thinking about you have guests. So that says parking, and I'm not sure which parking. I just know that people park and have these big events, like July the 4th. They just start coming. And if they don't ask to use your yard, they're gonna be right there in the streets. I don't want you to lose your family now, Mr. Code Enforcement. I don't want you to lose your family. Don't come out for that. You just tell them, if they kept it quiet, they just didn't have any place to park.
All right.
Bulk
No,
pickup
well,
or
noise.
trash?
Noise.
Oh, noise, we're
Yeah.
noise?
Yeah.
Okay, no comments?
Okay, very good. All right, I'm going to close the meeting to the committee for the moment, open it up to the public if anyone would like to come up and speak on the issue of noise specifically. Just state your name and address for the record, and then I'll save everyone just a little bit of trouble in terms of you having to repeat yourself ad
Sure.
nauseum, and
Please.
cut.
Okay.
We'll get down to business.
Thank you. Scott Kubrick, 8525 Northeast 4th Avenue Road.
All right.
And I think,
Yeah. So the reason the gentleman is here this evening is because he's come to a couple of council meetings and raised specifically the issue of noise, specifically as it relates to Skatebird, right? So a consistent discussion comes up, okay, well, what is the code? And so, Mr. Simmons, I would ask, I guess, initially here, what is the history in terms of specifically like citation been or pattern of interaction with Skatebird?
Overall, the way the ordinance read, it's a two-part ordinance. So when everyone reviews the ordinance, they like to focus on the time and the location part of it. But that is just the prima facie violation of the section is that between 12 and 8 from this distance, you're in violation. Now, people tend to just focus on that part, but that's not the case because the ordinance is in effect 24 hours a day. And it states that it should not be louder than necessary for a convenient hearing. The best way to explain it is that the noise should not exceed the property line. In reference to the way everyone is, they're homeowners. So if your living room is adjacent to someone's bedroom, they should not hear your TV. So in reference to Skatebird in particular, currently we had a meeting with them today, and they will be receiving a citation from a June 16th event, as well as, I believe, an event that just took place this past weekend. What tends to happen is that, I'm not here after hours, so PD has to respond, due to my absence. And they were loud. So the biggest issue is that our police department enforce laws. They don't know code. So a lot of times, they're not aware of whether or not something is a violation. So we did have a discussion with Skatebird today, as well as on several occasions, I will meet collectively with our police officers and just give them a little bit of more insight to the more common code violations that they will come across in my absence. But Skatebird, yes, they are receiving 2 citations. Noise by state law and by the Village of El Portal Code Ordinance is classified as irreparable and irreversible. And per the state law as well as our ordinance, we are allowed to go up as far as $5,000 for a citation. And that not only applies to commercial, that applies to residential. So any of the prohibited acts in reference to noise is violated, yes, you can receive a citation up to $5,000. The final determination of the $5,000 is based on a special master, because the way it works is I issue the citation, it gets presented before the special master along with all the evidence, and she makes the final determination about the actual amount.
She or he.
So that means I cannot have a mariachi in my backyard.
No, so, and that's another, a misconception amongst the village that certain events, as we express to all of the businesses, when you're doing something outside of your regular operations, it requires a special events permit. Same applies to a single family home. If you're having a birthday party, people parking, these activities that's outside of the normal use of your property, you don't do that often. So the same rules apply. But in particular, in reference to the noise, Skatebird will be receiving 2 citations upward of $5,000. But the special master makes the final determination based on the presented evidence about the final amount.
Sure.
Okay, so in this specific issue then, so I would ask you specifically, so because of the frequency of these events, right? And then the similar style of them in terms of specifically loud music, right? Crowd interaction. Like, I'm curious, do you get the, like the, like, you know what I mean? Do you hear that?
Yeah, so-
the first thing here is horns and signaling devices, and for anything other than emergency purposes, right? So that's like, you know, so, look, my recommendation in this specific issue is, let me preface. As he was talking about up to $5,000 fine, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, the goal of code enforcement is not to fundraise for the village. The code enforcement budget has nothing to do with projection or quota of how many citations might be given out in a year. The truth is, an ideally run code enforcement department really brings in almost no money because everybody's in compliance, right? So the purpose of all citations is to accomplish compliance, right? And with an outdated code specifically, the issue becomes, well, I can't come into compliance because I live in the 21st century, right? And so, so with this regard with noise, however, though, so is there any special exception because of the zone that Skatebird exists in? Is there any special exception that they would be able to otherwise exist outside of this specific noise ordinance because of the zone they're in?
No,
No.
the noise ordinance is
So the-
universal and it aligns with Miami-Dade County.
So the answer is no, right. So, you know, when you talk about a fine to the tune of $5,000, you're talking about punitive action, right? This is specifically to punish with the goal of accomplishing compliance, right? So, is that where we are officially at in terms of discussions and actions with Skatebird specifically as it pertains to noise complaints, that we are now officially in a pattern of issuing citations and heading essentially for an event where we will come to magistration and a judge will settle the matter? Is that essentially where we're headed in terms of our action and code compliance or code enforcement with Skatebird, specifically with noise?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So
Is he gonna talk?
yes, but he's talked for quite a while with us, and I think he might be a little relieved to not have to relive everything is that correct?
Yes,
You're more than welcome to
sure.
take the mic from me whenever you would be ready. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that the only comment that I have is just, it seems that that's a new, you know, that the citations have started happening, which of course I'm happy about. But it has been going on for a very, very long time. I would say, you know, a year or something around that time. And it has been happening consistently, you know, 2-3 days a week. So the fact that they have only received, you know, 2 citations, granted they're recent citations, so that means obviously maybe something, you know, is really starting to happen now and the wheels are getting in motion to start taking care of it, which is great. But I just want to make sure that that is what is, you know, sort of the case and what's occurring, and it's not that, you know, one of the key elements that I mentioned last time is that when I do call the police department, and I realize you raised the issue that, you know, the code, it's the police department after hours that is, you know, kind of enforcing the code. And so when that happens, the police department had in the past seemed to be under sort of a misconception that they had a special events permit, and they would call me, and, you know, I'd have to go through this process, you know, 3 days a week, and call over and over and over again through the non-emergency number, and I'd get a call back, and then the police officer would tell me that, well, they have a special events permit, and so, like, we could tell them to turn it down, but that's really all we can do, and it seems like that's not really the case, and as was pointed out last time as well, you know, to his point about, you know, you can't have a mariachi in your backyard, well, I think that the answer is he potentially could, as long as it's not being a nuisance to the neighbors.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, we can't really, I'm not regulating the events or really looking at what type of events they're having, and have no comments on that, other than that it seems that the events that they are having, and, you know, I see the promoted on Instagram and such, are really geared towards loud music, loud noise. And it seems like they are continuing to do that sort of in the face of being told that they are not supposed to, and possibly even receiving these citations. So
Yeah, so, you know, now that we are officially in a pattern of citation, which comes with, you know, this isn't necessarily like like, we're talking about citations that have fines attached to them, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah, please.
So as I stated, after hours, our PD will respond. So there was this misconception of the special event permit giving allowance to violate the ordinance. That's not the case. As I expressed, the special event permit simply serves as a one-time thing of you doing something outside the normal use of your property.
Sure.
So, you know, as I stated, I've met collectively with our entire department, and I gave them an in-depth rundown of the most common violations they will have to deal with after hours in reference to code enforcement. But I sincerely apologize because before, they're police officers. They enforce law, not code. So they're not aware that this exists or this is the process. So
Well-
now what tends to take place is that when the calls are placed and our officers do respond, first time is a warning, we must give a warning per our code. If you fail to comply, then it's they shut the event down, and then they give me the police report. And usage of the police report is how I enforce the code as far as punitive damages.
Okay.
So, Officer Simmons, would there be any way for a resident to competently document, you know, in terms of like, how would someone verify, like you could take a video, right, and demonstrate, hey, this is where I'm standing and I can prove it's this many feet away from this. How would someone go about being able to document how loud something might be other than something like a cell phone video? Would you have any recommendations or?
No, the only recommendation is to contact the non-emergency number, because the way code work is that me as a code enforcement officer must observe the violation in order to force the code.
Okay.
Now, granted, if one of our police officers observe it and document it, then that is allowed to be utilized within the court, within the special master
Right.
process, because they are sworn police officers.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a way for Skatebird to operate within this code, and you know, using teeth and enforcing this is going to be the only way we achieve compliance. So,
So they do have, we met with them today, so they currently are establishing a sound mitigation plan, which consists of installing some soundproof curtains that when certain events do take place, they're able to close it, you know, to mitigate the sound traveling. Because of the design of the property and of course sound,
Yeah.
it travels,
Right.
especially regarding to bass.
Right.
So they do have a sound mitigation plan in place that they're trying to implement, but as we continue forward, when it is a problem, contact the non-emergency number, and our police officers know exactly how to respond. In addition to that, at a lot of these special events, we're now requiring one of our officers to be present as a detail. So
Sure.
those are a few things that are taking place in reference to Skatebird in particular.
Great. And yeah, it just seems that, you know, I hope, I guess the first question is, you know, is there anything beyond that point? Because I know that they sort of have these events, and I'm not sure how much they make off of these events and whatnot, but is it the kind of thing where they could potentially look at it as, all right, well, I'm gonna make a certain amount off of this event, and if I do by some chance get the fine, which seems to happen, you know, not every time, that they'll kind of take that risk. Is that sort of, you know, the last thing that can take place? Because you know, I know that for a long time while this has been going on, they have been continuing to say, yeah, we're working on this sound mitigation plan and whatnot, which first of all, I don't know that the curtains alone will fix the issue. It seems like they might have to, you know, enclose their space really in order to do it, because it's really bad now. I mean, I'm not getting so into the detail because for the sake of repetition.
But it sounds like they would need to lower their levels by like as much as 50% or more. I mean, Really, 60%. I mean, like from going from level 10 down to level 3.5, you know, something like that is what it seems like would be necessary. Now, do they feel that they can generate enough energy in a crowd to have the events they want at that level? We're going to find out, because that's exactly where we're headed with this matter specifically, right? So, I mean, so let me ask you this, Officer Simmons. In the meeting that you had with him today, is he still seem empathetic to the issue and open to remedy?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I imagine that he would be, but, you know, at the same time, as the resident is saying, this has been going on for a year since they opened, technically.
It's one of them things where,
Right.
unfortunately, we can't regulate the type of event they have
Sure.
or how many they have. As far as enforcement of the noise, this is the only process we have. Now, we
Sure.
do have, it's within the Miami-Dade County Code. So I said it aligns. It's just the enforcement part is a little different. Whereas for our code, I can do the $5,000 fine because it's irreparable and irreversible. But the county code does allow law enforcement to arrest and do an imprisonment not to exceed more than 60 days. So they can do they can arrest and do a uniform civil citation not to exceed $500, but they also have the arresting powers if someone refused to comply.
Okay.
But our chief of police has now established the fact that first time is a warning. We must give a warning. Lower it. If they refuse to comply, they shut the event down. They don't want to comply with shutting the event down, then our police officers have the authority to go in there and to remove whatever piece of equipment is causing the nuisance.
Okay, great, because, you know, it does seem like, you know, it's happening, you know, 3 days a week where the bass is rattling inside of our house, and you know, we hear the music and the MC, you know, a lot of times, you know, saying vulgarities on you know, and everything, and you know, there's children, and it has been very, very bad, and it seems like their sort of attitude has been, yeah, we're going to get this, you know, fixed at some point. We're working on a plan, but in the meantime, we're just going to continue doing this and sort of ignoring all of the you know, problems that it's causing. So it's great that hopefully we're headed in the right direction on that.
Definitely call the non-emergency number. And in general, it's fine. Everyone has my cell number. It's fine to call me. You have any questions, concerns, or complaints. But it's best to utilize during office hours, to utilize the GovPilot software after business hours. Use the non-emergency number. Per chapter 162, you must give your name and address in order to initiate a code enforcement complaint. The only way that does not apply if it's health and safety. Everything else, it is required to give that in order to initiate a code complaint. I'm in the code investigation. Police is a little different. So after hours, the non-emergency number, during office hours, you're more than welcome to call me or use the code enforcement software.
Okay.
Good. All right.
Yeah. The,
Okay. No, we're gonna put teeth into this thing and get a resolution, because. Great.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes. So, all right. Good. Okay. Trash. Thoughts? I've got a couple thoughts on trash. All right. Let me bring this back to the committee. Yes. Okay. There we go. All right. I just want to say one quick thing about trash cans, and that is, it is my personal opinion that as long as the cans are up near the house and not, you know, as long as they look orderly or near the house, it should be acceptable that they would be visible. And the reason I say that, reason number one is we have elderly residents who are not going to be dragging heavy trash cans from the backyard to the front, you know, twice a week. That's reason number one. The other is, I mean, if we don't all look at the trash we use, then out of sight, out of mind has been a big problem with trash on this planet for a very long time, right? So let's all accept the fact that we could create a bunch of trash and be relatively okay with seeing other people's trash cans, which is certainly a part of reality. The thing here is on tree trimmings and yard trash in terms of bulk pickup, more or less, I imagine, is that right? And then in terms of what can be piled and dealt with. It's my understanding that you trim your trees and you break it down to where it can be disposed of in a garbage can. Anything that would not fit, essentially you're keeping out of sight until it would be time to put it in a can and get it to the street. Any thoughts on tree trimmings or yard trash? It's fine if you don't.
Just open it to the public to see
Okay,
what
all
they
right.
have to say.
I will open the meeting now, close the meeting to the committee and open it to the public. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, compliments, or complaints regarding tree trimmings, yard trash? This is a separate discussion than bulk pickup, okay? So in September, most likely bulk pickup will be an agenda item that we will talk about.
So, for clarity, yard trash is considered solid waste. That's like bulk. So,
Right, so the way I've been doing it for 10 years is I will manually, machete and whatnot, break down my yard debris into small enough pieces to be able to fit into the trash can. And if I have a lot, then it takes me, 2 or 3 trash days to get rid of it all. I believe that is the modus operandi at the moment in the village. All right. Let's see. Parking. I mean, I have this on, I have a list on here essentially to get us talking about some specific issues, so.
I'm sorry, and going back to the trash.
Yeah.
Where you touch
Oh,
about
yeah,
trash
sorry, let me
bins.
close the meeting to the public and bring it back to the committee. All right.
Yeah, unfortunately, even though, whether you were saying you have no problem by seeing the trash cans in the properties and as long as they're closer to the house and whatever, unfortunately, our code says otherwise.
Right.
So, and everybody needs to comply. And it's unfortunately that, sometimes you do have, I've seen since I've been living here for 9 years, a few houses, a few residents with where the trash can is set back. You can still see it is set back, but now you have residents leaving their trash can on the road just because it's a dead end or just because nobody cruise by there or whatever. So, and then the minute somebody else see it and said, oh, they're not enforcing the law. Why do I have to be the only, person or idiot to move it back to the side of the house? So it's just, we go back to the easements and the gravel and all of that. So the code has been written for how many years?
I've been in place, I believe, since 1965.
Right.
They
And
made-
it's
they
just
made
the
an
right
eff-
way
they
to
made
do
an
it.
effort in
Every-
84. They made an effort in 84.
Every municipality you go to, you barely see trash cans, outside, on the road, or where they're closer to the, or even on the sidewalk.
Yeah, but we've got a lot of
You know.
garage conversions where normally it would, and then now it's sitting right in front. So I think maybe as we get to the swale, as the swale picture comes into view, I think this is where we would have this discussion.
But
of-
I don't think we should have any problems with the trash bins, and
Yeah.
they should be the way it is, and everybody has to comply.
Yeah, so the
Period.
way the ordinance reads is, it must be hidden from public view from the right of way.
Okay.
And you're not allowed to put it out until the day preceding pickup after 4 p.m. And it should not be there exceeding 12 hours after pickup.
Okay.
Yeah. I do have, with the bulk pickup, I do have the issue with that because, honestly, nobody's gonna have the time,
Right.
especially if it's on a Wednesday or Thursday, they're passing.
I agree.
To have, because you only off on the weekend, so you have a few days, you have to do it that way.
Yeah.
And-
so I-
In my case, I was going on vacation just the week before trash, bulk pickup.
you have no
I don't
choice.
want the village to look the other way. I said, well, I won't take it out. I will get it out, then I'll wait until September.
Yeah.
So, because I
Right,
was
but
gonna be
that-
on vacation, I wanted to put it out a week before.
But that's not a good option
But
for
it
heading
wasn't
into,
not-
for
exactly.
heading into hurricane season. It'd be better to give you the week to, yeah.
So, As a courtesy,
But 4
if we
days,
talking a
I
couple,
think it's.
if we talking don't get me wrong, bulk, for clarification, bulk trash is a health and safety.
Right.
So that's another violation where I don't give you time to comply. It's an automatic fine, as well as considering it's on the right of way. We can also bill you to have the village remove it. But, you know, that's Pandora's box, because if I have 20 homes doing it, I can't do that against 20 homes. So it's a couple days, a week tops before.
A week, I will say it'll be
It's fine.
reasonable, yes.
But 3 weeks, a month,
No.
pick up September, and you're putting it out right now. Nah,
So at the committee meeting in September, that bulk, specifically bulk pickup will be on the agenda.
Yeah.
And I think we can hammer it out pretty quickly then.
Right.
Okay. All right. Very good. Before we move on to the code enforcement flyer and eventually then close the meeting, I will ask, is there any other specific aspect, Vice Perella, within these codes, these common issues that you were hoping to discuss tonight that we have not discussed?
No.
Very good.
think
I would ask the same
everything's
question to the
Yeah.
public. Is there any, I will close the meeting now to the committee and open it to the public. If there's anybody who would like to speak about any kind of reoccurring issue or sticking point with code enforcement specifically that you were hoping to see addressed tonight that has not been discussed, now would be the time. Fantastic. I'll close. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Just once again, state your name and address for the record.
Scott Kobrick, 8525 Northeast 4th Avenue Road. I wasn't sure whether or not to add this to the previous part, but I guess it just is a question about, potentially how a ordinance would be potentially changed. Because I guess I don't want to sound like the noise police here, but we basically, I think because of the location of my house, which is actually just down this block, and we have the sort of annex, I guess, which is on 83rd Street. So there is not only Skatebird, that is definitely the biggest issue that I face and why I wanted to kind of focus on that. But there's also construction going on, these new residential buildings that are being constructed. There's one that has been going on, the Cavista, for about a year and has been being built. And then I have heard through the grapevine that now that as soon as sort of that is going to be completed, which I've been anxiously awaiting to happen, they're going to be doing another building on the water, sort of right directly adjacent. And so I expect that that's going to be a whole nother, year or whatnot before that is completed and what we experience with that is, beeping, a lot of beep. There was, a period of time where there was sort of a lot of things that were a huge disturbance to us, but that I think were, potentially, there's nothing you could do about it if they are able to do that and they're doing construction. But then there's also things that have seemed avoidable that, I had, been in contact with the owner about with regards to the beeping from the booms that they have, that they've been doing the painting and everything, that I think that they could have probably done a different system, maybe scaffolding. I spoke to my friend who's a GC who builds similar types of buildings, and he said that definitely could have been done with scaffolding and a different system that wouldn't have affected created so much noise. And that
you're saying the cherry pickers that they use to paint?
Correct. Yeah. They're constantly beeping all day long.
Yeah, whether they move forwards or backwards, right?
Yeah, they have
if they're moving at all, they're beeping.
Yeah. Anytime they adjust it, so they're painting one area, and they have I think 8 of them going right now, so it's just nonstop all day long, and it's been going on now for a few months. I guess so that has been definitely a big disturbance, and I was wondering, I had questioned them about whether or not they were able to come up with a different system, and they basically told me sort of straight up that yes, there was, but that it would take them more time and they're trying to get the project done. And I said to them, well, if you had tenants living in the apartments right now, I'm sure you would be a little bit more considerate about that, as you should be to the other neighbors that are there. So that, I don't believe has gotten resolved, but I guess that was sort of just a point that I wanted to bring up about that and that area over there that is, having a lot of new development and commercial, I think more commercial development. And because of that, I was wondering specifically if, I know that, certain municipalities and cities have a, little bit more limitations on the construction hours. And I don't think that it was an issue so much in the history of El Portal because it was mostly residential. Somebody's doing work to their house or whatnot, you're probably going to experience that for a much shorter duration. But when this type of work is happening, and going to continue happening, I was wondering if there was any, way in which to potentially update the ordinance to put more limitation on the working hours, specifically Saturday. Right now, sort of the only.
So there's two avenues to accomplish that. One is through this committee, the other is through the Planning and Zoning Committee. So through either one of those committees, recommendations can be made to change specific ordinances. So, so here's, you can make an ordinance up to the point, which we're finding out with the short-term rental ordinance that we're working on, right? You can make an ordinance with teeth up until a point someone says it's unconstitutional, right? So there is definitely a discussion to be had in there with a couple of different types of experts on how far we could go in terms of requiring, but I think there's definitely a path in there somewhere, and the beautiful thing about having our own village is that again, up until the state, the feds, or the county tell us that we can't do something, we certainly technically can kind of do a lot. So so I would be hopeful that there would be a path, because when we get sewer in on 2nd Avenue, we're going to have commercial development. We already have some beginning over there already. And so with the issues with the little farm, this is not going to, the Cavista is essentially the first large construction project in the village in a long time, but it's the first of what seems to be several on the way. So that would be my short answer, would be either through the Planning and Zoning or this committee. Recommendations could absolutely be made to ordinances to change.
Yeah, so
with the council.
the noise ordinance regarding construction aligns with the county, and I believe it's, is either you align or you set a more strict precedence, but.
Which is encouraging because we're trying to set something more strict,
Yeah.
so, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, especially considering that, I just want to say that to everybody here and whoever might be, interested in this, I am experiencing it because of my proximity to the new construction that is happening, and it seems that, as was mentioned, there seems, I think there's plans for a lot more of that. And it can really, really impact you and your health with the current way in which it happens. It's, the current working hours are until 7 p.m. every 6 days a week. So when they're going through, these you have basically from, I believe, 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. that you're hearing constant, trucks beeping.
I'll even say,
drilling,
I can almost guarantee that
yeah.
the painters themselves hear the beeping in their sleep, so.
Yeah, exactly, and it's
Yeah.
that's I think an OSHA requirement, but there's, and so it's definitely really impactful on your health. You kind of feel like you can't escape from it for so many hours of the week, and so I would suggest that maybe something until 5 p.m. and also limiting on Saturdays
Right.
as well, as I know that, other areas, I think Surfside and some other, cities. And
Oh, yeah, don't let anybody convince you. If you want to be exclusive, you can be exclusive to some degree, so.
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
Great. Thank you.
All right, very good. Does anyone else from the public have anything to discuss with the exciting topic of code enforcement this evening? All right, bringing the meeting back to the committee. Last topic is the code enforcement flyer, which I do believe has gone out. I received it on my doorstep not too long ago. So everyone should have gotten the code enforcement flyer with a few hot button topics on it. And I imagine Officer Simmons is going to tell us it's available on the website as well. Yeah.
Yes, and the code enforcement corner, as well as the FYI, which has the GovPilot links to file a concern, or track or review a concern, or just overall look at a concern that's assessed to your property, as well as the state statute regarding anonymous complaints.
Very good. That's wonderful. How often do you think has the mayor enlisted you in putting this together on a certain kind of time, like quarterly, whatnot? I'm just curious.
No,
Okay.
there is none, but these
Because it was
are
great. It was really great. So
yeah, these are the most common.
Yeah.
These are the most common.
And honestly, if
code
you kept this and if you kept this one is in cycle for like 3 quarters straight, that would have its own benefit as well.
Yeah.
So you might not even have to redo it each time and make that extra work. You could actually use one for a whole year probably and finally reach a significant number of people.
Yeah.
So
And for the record, that was actually my idea.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because I don't, again, and you said it before, we're not here to collect, or to make, anybody, lives impossible, or to
Right.
be collecting money. It's just for people to be aware. And then if you're doing something, we were going through the thing, okay, you either cite it, well, I don't want you to be citing anybody, but make people aware of what's going on, of the code and what everything is, and then, you go from there. But yes.
Yeah, because
So it's
these are the-
information is
yeah.
everything.
Because these are the most common code violations that can result in an immediate penalty.
Yeah, very good. All right, awesome. Would anybody from the public have anything to say about the code enforcement flyer? All right, thought not. Very good. On to the final good and welfare of the evening. Anybody who'd like to come up and speak about anything at all, 3 minutes. We will be a little judicious about this one. But please, yes. And again, just name and address for the record.
Okay. Calixto Navarro, 335 Northeast 87th Street. Thank you once again to all of you. I wanted to bring up an issue that just recently happened regarding a code violation, but I bring it up in this section because I think it has more to do with administrative and having things clear and all the ducks being in a row than any issue in particular. This violation happens to be, and it really hits home because I'm friendly with all of you. I know you all. I'm always in here, okay? And it's regarding the lot on 8580 Northeast Northeast 2nd Avenue, which my sign has been there for over a year. My real estate sign. I was one of those 24 cases with the owner of that property that went in front of the special master, and also you were the case right before me, the Savinos. And we all make mistakes, but the most important thing is that we recognize our mistakes, okay? And at the special master, my client, the one who owns the property, Mr. Payot from Another Development LLC, looked like he was not being truthful. And in reality, Mr. Simmons, when you said that he must not have updated from Sunbiz the address to where the citations were going to, I actually went back and I did the work. Since 2020, this has been the correct address where the certified mail went out, and also for the property appraiser's office. The address had been changed like 5 years ago. What's happening is information is not, things are not happening clearly, and it's costing people money. I had to come here, put on my American Express, and I paid a fine because the magnanimous master decided to cut the violation from $1,500 to $644, when in actuality it was a mistake inside of the village because the village is not updating the county records. Because if you would go to the property appraisers, this has been the address where everything was supposed to be mailed to. Not only that, but this is a common issue for years and years. I have been pulling permits the last few weeks. They assigned my roofer to my neighbor's house. What do you mean? What is my roofer's contractor doing assigned to somebody else randomly? Why is my water heater, one of the officials here at the time he was fired, Christia fired him, he threatened to beat up the my gas line person, who, by the way, is a referral of the village of El Portal in Miami-Dade County. He has the contracts for people's gas. And he threatened him. He said, I did not have a permit. I pulled out the file. I had the passed, like it was passed, and the permit number was given to the inspector of our property on the northwest side. So what is happening is information is not being transferred. How can the files not be updated in the village of Airport? How many homes are here? I think we have like 300 homes.
It's like 850 homes.
850 homes. A week, once a year, to update the files. To make matters worse, after you sent the certified letter, that was the only one that he got, because I think at some point somebody went into Sunbiz, because when I went to pay the fine and I go to pay, guess what? The receipt of the village of El Portal had the wrong address. And I said, Franco, this is the wrong address. Can you please correct it? You're charging me for something that I shouldn't even be paying. And so technically, if we look at it in the legal parameters, number one, false information was given to a magistrate on behalf of the village, but everybody gets confused, Mr. Simmons, and that's okay. But the thing is that if we look at it from the legal standpoint, and I'm not an attorney, but I'm a realtor, you never gave notice. You never gave notice because the information was correct, but you were sending it to old information because in the village information was not updated to county records. And by the way, I printed it up and I'll give it to you. These are all the annual reports, because you said you went on Sunbiz and you didn't go on Sunbiz.
No. In reference to code enforcement, all mailings go to the property under the property appraiser. It's the responsibility of the owner to update any information.
It's updated. It's been updated since 2020. We're not updating it here.
And then also, no. We don't update anything here on the property for code enforcement. So when I observe a violation and I have to mail a note.
It's been here.
Let me explain.
To clarify, what we're talking about is the building department.
That's something separate. In reference to code enforcement, when I write a notice, I certify mail it to the property record address on the property appraiser. In addition to satisfy the due process, if I don't get a signature receipt, I have to post to the property 10 days prior to the enforcement of the notice, which I did.
But Mr. Simmons, what I'm saying is, the property appraiser has had the correct address since 2020.
So at the magistration process, was this not hashed out, this discrepancy?
No, because the problem was, it was in front of the magistrate. It was a Zoom call. I didn't know my client calls me up, he goes, I got a certified letter. He goes, why am I getting this certified letter? And then when we go to the magistrate, he said.
So,
that-
excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is for the signage that's been there for a year or so.
What?
Is this citation for this real
Right.
estate sign that's been there without a permit or expired permit?
No, an expired permit. And
Okay.
when I went, that I realized it had expired. 2
Oh,
weeks had gone by,
okay.
but remember, you're getting charged at $100
So it
a day.
expires,
$100 a day, 2 weeks, 1,500.
and expires in what, 30 days or 60 days?
No, it's a 6 months. The
It's a
permit is
6-month
for
permit.
it's a 6-month permit. But the issue
Yeah.
here is Luis and Ambers and Dr. Lightfoot Ward and Janice and everybody. For God's sakes, I'm like right across the street, and I asked Franco, I said, is this in violation? No, you're fine, go. You know, the thing is, the lack of communication. You all know me. Nobody could, my phone.
Right, so Franco in the building department.
Yeah.
Yes, so
When I
that-
went
I put down notes here for CapGov, assigned wrong address, a GC to wrong address. I've got notes here regarding, a lot of
Right,
my
when I
notes,
went
a
to
lot of
pay
my,
the
a lot of my notes I
fine.
have is actually with the building department and CapGov.
Right,
so,
but
yeah.
the thing is, he goes to the master, he says, I checked it on Sunbiz. And, after we hung up, I talked to the owner of the property, he goes, Calixto, it's always been 22552 South Miami Avenue. Always. It's never had any other address. So that is the reason why. I don't understand. I have it here.
Well, okay, as you noticed throughout the code enforcement, at the special master hearing, I showed the evidence of when it was observed. I showed a copy of the mailing, and I do an initial copy of the Miami-Dade property appraiser. I have that of record, and that's submitted as record. But in reference to code enforcement, whether or not he received the certified mail as a part of the due process certification, I have to post it to the property. Whether or not you go by the property to get it or check on the property, due process was satisfied with the mailing and the posting.
Notice was not given. You were mailing it to a wrong
We're not-
address.
but we're not-
You did not give proper notice.
We're not gonna be able to litigate or relitigate this here. right?
Okay, but
Yeah.
I just want to make a
And
note of it,
additional-
and I'm going to write a letter.
I encourage you to sincerely. I additionally want to say that it was it was a judge who made this decision, not Mr. Simmons. However, I'm curious to know, is Manager Alou aware of this specific issue?
No, I
Okay.
was bringing it, I was hoping
Okay.
she would be here
She had to
because,
leave early to get to it,
but I'm gonna write a letter, but I wanted to bring
And
it
I'll
up
write an
here
email
because
too,
this is
so.
an ongoing issue. It's been
Yes.
happening for years.
I absolutely, no, it's.
But in all due respect, it has nothing to do with Franco. There's been a lot of people that have come
Right.
through that office and, lost blueprints. I mean, a lot of things have happened there.
Fortunately, that department is being enhanced.
But
Right.
come on,
Little by little.
please.
Right.
Nobody,
It hasn't been for
nobody
many
could
years,
pick up Mr.
so-
Simmons. All the million times I bump into you nobody could have said anything. And I even asked, "Hey, is there a violation because I was late? I was 2 weeks late." Pulling. For God's sakes, this is not a city of 2 million. How many empty lots are in El Portal? How many empty lots do we have? 3. One of them being mine. Come on. Please, for God's sakes.
Yes, no,
We're not dealing with, Dade County or
Certainly,
anything.
no.
Anyway,
So
I want my money back. I do want my $644 back because notice was not given. And I'm gonna bring it up with Christia.
certainly, yes, and then just as Vice Mayor Perella is saying, is that we are actively in several ways, but not the least of which is we are bolstering our building department specifically for the purpose of being able to digitize everything and for the purpose of alignment of records.
But the most important thing
But
is
we need to know-
update the records
look,
because
I'm-
if not, I'm
I'm
gonna.
incredibly glad you brought this up because
You know what? I'm
because
gonna
we need
bring.
to know about these discrepancies, so we
I'm gonna bring in a piece of paper and give it here, and I'm gonna say my home taxes are $100 for 2023, and just file it
Very
with,
good. All right.
with El Portal.
Very good. All right. All right. Anyone who's seen me run a meeting before knows that I'm always incredibly appreciative to have people residents come to these meetings. I understand it's time consuming. I understand it's not enjoyable to get up here and voice complaints even sometimes, but it is necessary. We cannot do our jobs at all without residential input. So thank you to everyone who has been here this evening. Is there anyone at all who would like to say any last words on anything at all this evening? If not, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Dr. Lightfoot Ward. Do I have a second? Second, Vice Mayor Perella. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Very good. Hearing none, the committee is adjourned at 8:33 p.m.